All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Friday, September 13th. Yep, Friday the 13th. And we are watching potential Tropical Cyclone 9 spinning away in the Bahamas here this morning with some new forecast information from the National Hurricane Center, as well as the latest on what is going on with this storm and how much of a threat, if any, it will be to the southeast coast. So, taking a look at our friend here this morning, this is still a potential tropical cyclone, which means it is not actually a tropical depression or tropical storm yet. It's simply an area that is producing or could very shortly produce tropical storm conditions through parts of the Bahamas and then also through parts of southeast Florida. And what they're saying is essentially that they're telling me a quick time needs to be updated. It's important stuff. What it also tells us is that potential tropical cyclone 9 could become a tropical cyclone at any point, or a tropical storm at any point in time. That's why they go ahead slap the warning label on it so they can get the watches and warnings out where they need to be. It's needlessly complicated, but that's what we're dealing with. So once again, if you're looking at that and going, what is a potential tropical cyclone? It's a fancy way to get around the own rules that we wrote right for ourselves. That's basically what it is. Anyway, this is shortly to become Tropical Storm Humberto. We're looking at some organization attempts this morning here on the GO 16 imagery. We can see here that embedded in this big mass of clouds, there's actually some interesting features. The number one being this area right here as convection's really starting to fire. And if you pay close attention, you can see a little spin right about there. You can see a little spin starting up. And what this is we had a surface circulation right here this morning, a weak kind of a mesovort, like a small surface low. And the upper level low is more over here, which the centers need to kind of come together. They need to align themselves. Right now, they're kind of obviously they're off center of each other. But I think what's happening is there's probably a second low level vort up under here, and what's probably happening is the storm is consolidating a new center up under here. When we see these broad circulation centers like this, within them you can see multiple lows will pop up, and then eventually one will win and fight out the other ones, and then that's where the storm will kind of consolidate. So that's kind of what we were talking about yesterday when you get these broad circulations. Yesterday we were thinking maybe the center of circulation could be somewhere down here, but now it appears that it might be all the way up here. And when you launch your point from here instead of here, you can get big differences in your forecast track. So looking at that, we've seen this morning the National Hurricane Center has shifted this track considerably further east. It has shifted east with every advisory. That's because now there's higher confidence that that circulation center will form further north than maybe some of our models thought yesterday. The GFS had the circulation center maybe as far south as, like drifting over South Florida, whereas that's a good 50, 80 miles difference to the north, which shifts your whole track over from there as it interacts with the highest pressures over the east coast and offshore, and then the trough coming down in a couple days. That's going to hopefully turn this thing away from us. So everything kind of shifts with the timing and then with the location. But last night's track was more directly onshore and stalling over Jacksonville and then coming out over the ocean by Tuesday, Wednesday, where this one now has shifted significantly further east and brings a storm up here right along the coast of Florida, but significantly offshore and then turning away. Very similar to how Dorian did. Dorian was almost exactly right here whenever it made its more northward turn, but Dorian hugged the coast closer and went more like this as it went offshore, whereas this storm you can see will split off quicker and then move a little more of a sharper hook offshore, which should keep this thing away from the Carolinas if everything goes as planned. Looking at the longer term outlook here, you can see that it looks like it's going to really take a hard hook and stay further offshore. So hopefully that does just that. Looking at the current watches and warnings, again, we do have tropical storm watches remain in effect, not only for the tropical storm warnings remain in effect for the Bahamas, but then for Florida, we still have this tropical storm watch from Jupiter Inlet, which is just north of West Palm Beach, all the way up to the Flagler Volusia County line, just north of Daytona Beach. So all these coastal counties could still see tropical storm force winds, although this new easterly track would be less likely to see them. You could still see the gusts, especially along the coast. But if any continued further east shifts that the Hurricane Center does note are possible, that might be less and less likely. You can see the latest tracks here from the hurricane models. We do have the official track here in black that I'm highlighting now in pink, and you can see the Hurricane Center still lying to the west of some of those major models and some of the bigger hurricane models. So if we do continue to see this more northerly shift and where we think the circulation center will form, then that may prompt the Hurricane Center to shift this even a bit further east. Although these models see the storm a bit further west, so it might all kind of work out, and this might wind up being the cone we get in some capacity. But that's generally what we're looking at here this morning as far as that goes. Looking at the longer term outlook as far as the modeling is concerned, this is the European model's upper level outlook. So we do have a large area of high pressure that's going to slide downwards. And we're essentially going to see a high pressure form over the eastern United States and then a high pressure form offshore. And what's going to happen over the next day or two. So this is going into Sunday and then eventually into Monday as we have our highs kind of situated here. We have the edge of a high pressure here and the edge of a high pressure here. And they would not have much in the way of net steering flow on the storm, but we do have this trough coming down from the north, and what that's going to do is going to further erode this high and knock it out of the way, and it'll allow the storm to slip even further east. And what happens is going into Tuesday, we see this trough is fairly strong, and this high is sort of backed off some, and this high is sort of backed off some. And we do have an envelope where the storm might be able to slip out to sea, and it is also going to coax it to turn harder to the right, where this high on the right was stronger when Dorian was here and it was trying to push it into the coast. This one seems to be weaker due to this stronger trough influence, as we have a giant ridge over the central United States. That's going to be hot. But generally speaking, you're going to see this trough here, and that's going to hopefully pull this system away, which will be by then Humberto or Hurricane Humberto, possibly. At this point in time, but it looks like it's going to move offshore of Florida, and it is going to take that harder hook away. So hopefully that is the case, and we don't see much. On this course and track, I would not expect much in the way of impacts for Florida. We're going to go to 2 p.m. on Saturday, so this storm is just now exiting the Bahamas, and this is the European model's run. And the storm could be a little east of this, so if you're watching this track, maybe just think it's a tiny bit east. But overall, I just threw a marker near the east coast of Florida just to show you what we might see here. This is a sustained winds, so going into Saturday night, you can see some of those winds are picking up, and this will be very nor'easter type conditions, and I would think heavy rain showers would be moving on and offshore as this went by. These more disorganized storms are notorious for putting more rain over the area than a really strong, well-developed, like tight hurricane would, because the bands aren't going to want to stay as close to the storm. They'll just be all kind of scattered and kind of moving around the storm here. So I would still think some rain is in the forecast for us, but overall you can see the wind's not doing much here. We'll go to about 9 a.m. on Sunday where the storm has moved up closer, but you can still see keeping a healthy distance of about 100 miles offshore, and this storm won't be nearly as strong as Dorian was when it was around this point in time. So you're looking at this tropical storm force sustained winds only really maybe in this core right here, and they're just not going to be all that close. And you can see going into Sunday evening to Sunday night, the storm is beginning to already hook away, and the winds just never really get all that strong up here along the coastline. Tropical storm force gusts maybe at the beach, and then by Monday into Tuesday, the storm is moving away and offshore and beyond. So overall, not too bad as far as that's concerned. So overall, guys, this is what I got for you here this morning. This looks like pretty good news for us. I would, caution to remain vigilant if the system were to maybe pop up a little bit further south than we thought this afternoon. Maybe this one isn't quite the when we think it is, and it goes a little further south, the tropical storm conditions still occur, but it does appear at this point in time that the system will stay offshore in some capacity, and it also hopefully appears it is going to hook hard enough to stay away from the Carolinas, although I will caution going in late to this week, if that trough is not as strong as advertised and it kind of misses the bus here, it may get trapped under high pressure and wander out here, and when the storms wander, we're never quite sure what they're going to do, so it is going to be worth to keep an eye on out here, but overall, right now, this does look like somewhat limited impacts to the east coast of the United States at this point in time. So that's what I got for you here this morning, guys. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.